I never thought a couple of foot-long icicles would turn me into the most hated man in Pine Ridge Estates. But here we are, standing in my driveway with $3,000 in damage claims, and a lawyer who keeps telling me this is the most ridiculous case he has seen all year. My name is Jacob Garrison, and I have lived in this cookie-cutter subdivision in Aurora, Colorado for 6 years now. The houses all look the same: beige siding with brown trim, perfectly manicured lawns that nobody actually uses, and an HOA so strict they once fined my neighbor for having the wrong shade of welcome mat. I bought the place after my divorce because it was affordable and close to my engineering job at Lockheed Martin. I kept my head down, paid my dues, mowed my lawn every Saturday, and generally tried to avoid any drama. That strategy worked pretty well until this past January, when nature decided to decorate my roof with some impressive ice formations. Colorado winters can be brutal, and this year was no exception. We got hit with a massive snowstorm right after New Year's, the kind that dumps 2 feet of powder overnight and shuts down the highways for days. My roof, like everyone else's in the neighborhood, accumulated a thick blanket of snow. The problem was my gutters had gotten slightly clogged with leaves before winter hit, so when the sun came out and started melting that snow during the day, the water would drip down and refreeze at night, creating these massive icicles along my roofline. Some of them were easily 3 feet long, thick as my forearm, hanging there like crystal daggers. I noticed them one morning when I was scraping ice off my windshield. They were actually kind of beautiful in that dangerous, nature is scary sort of way. I made a mental note to knock them down when I got home from work, but honestly, it slipped my mind. I had a major project deadline coming up, my boss was breathing down my neck, and I was pulling 12-hour days trying to get everything done. The icicles were not exactly my top priority. That changed on a Tuesday afternoon when I came home to find a bright orange envelope tucked into my front door. I recognized it immediately. Those orange envelopes were the HOA's way of telling you that you had screwed up somehow. I had seen my neighbors get them for everything from parking their car on the street overnight to having their trash cans visible from the road on a non-collection day. My stomach sank as I pulled out the letter. Dear Mr. Garrison, it read in that passive-aggressive formal tone that HOA boards seem to love. It has come to our attention that your property at 4782 Meadowbrook Lane is in violation of Section 7.3.2 of the Pine Ridge Estates Community Guidelines regarding property maintenance and hazardous conditions. The icicles hanging from your roof pose a significant safety risk to pedestrians and neighboring properties. You are hereby fined $250 and are required to remove said icicles within 72 hours or face additional penalties of $100 per day until the violation is corrected. Sincerely, Patricia Hendricks, HOA President. I read the letter 3 times, sure I was missing something. $250 for icicles. Ice that would melt on its own in a few days anyway. I looked up at my roofline. Sure, the icicles were big, but they were hanging over my own driveway and yard. Nobody walked past my house on that side. There was no sidewalk, no pathway, nothing. The only person at risk was me, and I was perfectly capable of walking around them. I went inside and immediately pulled out my copy of the HOA guidelines. I had gotten a thick binder when I bought the house, filled with rules about everything from fence heights to approved paint colors. I flipped to Section 7.3.2. The actual text said homeowners were responsible for maintaining their property in a safe condition that does not pose undue risk to others. It was one of those vague catch-all clauses that could mean basically anything the HOA board wanted it to mean. The fine was ridiculous, but I figured I would just take care of the icicles that weekend and be done with it. I called the HOA office the next morning to let them know I would handle it. The phone rang 4 times before someone picked up. Pine Ridge HOA, this is Brenda speaking. Hi Brenda, this is Jacob Garrison from Meadowbrook Lane. I got a violation notice about icicles on my roof, and I wanted to let you know I will be removing them this Saturday. There was a pause. Mr. Garrison, the notice specifies 72 hours. That deadline is Friday at 5 p.m. Right, but I work during the week, and it's not exactly safe to be climbing around on ladders in the dark after I get home. Saturday morning is the first chance I will have to deal with it properly. The guidelines are clear, Mr. Garrison. 72 hours. I felt my jaw tighten. Look, these icicles are not hurting anyone. They are over my own driveway. Nobody even walks on that side of my house. Mrs. Hendricks personally inspected your property and determined the icicles pose a hazard. The fine stands, and if the violation is not corrected by Friday, additional daily fines will apply. Can I at least speak with Mrs. Hendricks about this? She's very busy. If you would like to contest the fine, you can submit a written appeal to be reviewed at the next board meeting in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. The icicles would be long gone by then, and I would still be out the money. This is insane. Is there anything else I can help you with today, Mr. Garrison? I hung up without answering. My hands were shaking. I had dealt with bureaucratic nonsense before, but this was a whole different level. $250 because some busybody HOA president did not like the way nature decorated my roof. I tried to let it go. I really did. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I paid over $1,000 a year in HOA fees for what? So they could maintain a tiny community pool that was only open 3 months a year and host awkward potluck dinners nobody attended. And now, they wanted to fine me for something completely beyond my control. That evening, I decided to do some research. I pulled up the county records and started looking into Patricia Hendricks. She had been HOA president for 4 years, and according to the meeting minutes posted on the community website, she had personally issued over 60 violation notices in the past 12 months alone. Overgrown grass, unauthorized holiday decorations, cars parked in driveways instead of garages, even one poor guy who got fined because his house numbers were the wrong font. It was a pattern of petty tyranny, and I was just the latest victim. Friday came, and I still had not removed the icicles. Partly because I genuinely did not have time during the week, but mostly because I was stubborn and the whole thing felt unjust. When I got home that evening, there was another orange envelope waiting for me. This one informed me that I was now being fined an additional $100 per day starting immediately. I was furious. I grabbed my phone and called the HOA office again, but it was after 5 and nobody answered. I left a voicemail that was probably more heated than it should have been, something about how this was harassment and I would be consulting a lawyer. Then I went inside and poured myself a very large glass of whiskey. Saturday morning, I woke up with a headache and a determination to end this nonsense. I pulled on my winter coat, grabbed a ladder from my garage, and set it up against the side of the house. The icicles were even more impressive up close. Some of them had to weigh 20 or 30 pounds. I took a broom handle and started carefully knocking them down, letting them crash into the snow below. It took about an hour to clear them all. Problem solved, or so I thought. I took photos of my now icicle-free roofline and emailed them to the HOA office with a polite note saying the violation had been corrected and requesting that the fines be waived given that I had addressed the issue within a reasonable time frame. Patricia Hendricks responded Monday morning. The fine would not be waived. In fact, because I had not complied within the original 72-hour window, I now owed the original $250 plus $300 in daily penalties for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. $550 total. I sat at my desk at work, staring at that email in disbelief. They were charging me for the weekend, days when their office was not even open, days when they could not have possibly expected me to contact them or handle anything official. It was pure greed disguised as rule enforcement. I called my buddy Marcus, who worked as a paralegal. He listened to the whole story and then said what I was already thinking. Man, that's messed up, but HOAs have a lot of legal authority. You signed the covenants when you bought the house. They can pretty much fine you for whatever they want as long as it's in the guidelines, and that property maintenance clause is broad enough to cover this. So I am just supposed to pay it. You could fight it, but it would cost you more in legal fees than the fine itself. HOAs know that. It's how they get away with this stuff. Most people just pay and move on. I did not want to just pay and move on. I wanted justice, or revenge, or at least some satisfaction that I had not been completely steamrolled. But I also was not stupid enough to throw thousands of dollars at lawyers over a $500 fine. I paid it. I wrote a check, stuck it in an envelope, and dropped it off at the HOA office personally. Patricia Hendricks was there, a woman in her mid-50s with aggressively blonde hair and the kind of smile that does not reach the eyes. She took my payment with a sugary sweet, "Thank you so much for taking care of this, Mr. Garrison. We do appreciate homeowners who follow the rules." I did not trust myself to respond, so I just nodded and left. February came with more snow and another round of icicles. This time they were even bigger because the freeze-thaw cycle had been particularly intense. I looked at them hanging from my roof and felt a cold anger settling in my chest. I knew what was coming. Sure enough, 3 days later, another orange envelope appeared. This time the fine was $300 with the same 72-hour deadline. I did not even bother calling. I knocked down the icicles that same evening, emailed proof, and paid the fine online. $300 gone just like that. It happened again in March. By then, I was actively researching ways to prevent icicles from forming. I bought heating cables that were supposed to keep your gutters clear, but they did not work with my clogged drainage system. I tried to clear the gutters myself, but there was still so much snow and ice up there that it was nearly impossible. Every time the temperature rose above freezing during the day and dropped at night, more icicles would form. Patricia sent me another violation notice. Another $300. I paid it, but something inside me had shifted. I was not just angry anymore. I was plotting. The weather forecast for late March showed a major warm front moving in. Temperatures were going to spike into the 50s and stay there for almost a week. That meant all the snow on everyone's roofs, all the ice, everything was going to melt at once. I had an idea, and the more I thought about it, the more perfect it seemed. I stopped removing my icicles. When the next violation notice came, I ignored it. When Patricia called me personally to demand I take care of it, I told her I was considering my legal options and would respond in writing. She threatened additional fines. I hung up on her. By the 3rd week of March, my roofline looked like something out of a fantasy movie. The icicles had grown massive, some of them 4 feet long, gleaming in the sun like frozen fangs. They were dangerous, absolutely, but they were only dangerous to anyone directly underneath them. And the only thing directly underneath them was my driveway. Here is where I got creative. Pine Ridge Estates had assigned parking spots at the community clubhouse for events and board meetings. The HOA board met every second and fourth Tuesday of the month, and Patricia Hendricks always parked in the same spot, right up front. But I noticed that several board members, including Patricia, had taken to parking on the street in front of my house when the clubhouse lot was full. It was perfectly legal according to local parking ordinances, even though the HOA discouraged it. The warm front was due to arrive on a Tuesday. Board meeting day. I did not do anything to encourage it, but I also did not do anything to discourage it when I saw Patricia's silver Mercedes SUV parked on the street directly in front of my house that morning. She must have had an early meeting or errands in the neighborhood. Her car sat there, gleaming in the morning sun, positioned perfectly under my roofline where the largest cluster of icicles hung. I went to work. I did not touch the icicles. I did not call her. I did not do anything except wait. The temperature hit 52 degrees by noon. I checked the weather app on my phone obsessively. By 2 p.m. it was 55. The sun was bright, and I knew what was happening back home. All that ice was softening, melting at the base where it attached to the roof. Physics and gravity were about to have a conversation, and Patricia's Mercedes was about to be part of it. I left work early, something I never did, but I needed to see this. I needed to witness the natural consequences of her petty tyranny. When I pulled onto my street at 3:30, Patricia's car was still there, and my icicles were starting to go. I could see water dripping steadily from the roofline. Some of the smaller icicles had already fallen, leaving dark spots in the snow below. I parked in my driveway and went inside, but I kept watching through my front window. At 4:15, it happened. The first major icicle let go with a sound like a gunshot, a massive spear of ice that had to weigh 40 pounds. It plummeted straight down and hit the hood of Patricia's Mercedes with a boom that echoed down the street. I watched the hood crumple inward, the metal buckling under the impact. Then another one fell, and another. It was like watching a bombing run in slow motion. Each icicle crashed down with devastating force, punching holes in the roof, spidering the windshield, denting the doors. The car alarm started screaming. Neighbors came out of their houses to see what was happening. I stepped outside too, playing the concerned citizen. "Oh my God," my neighbor Doug from across the street said, jogging over. "Is that Patricia's car?" "I think so," I said, working hard to keep my voice neutral. "Wow, those icicles really came down hard. Are you kidding? Dude, your icicles just totaled her car." "I guess the warm weather made them melt," I shrugged. "Natural occurrence. Nothing I could do about it." Doug gave me a look that said he knew exactly what I had done, or rather what I had not done, but he did not say anything. A lot of people in the neighborhood had been on the receiving end of Patricia's violation notices. There was not a lot of sympathy for her at that moment. Patricia arrived about 20 minutes later, probably having been called by another neighbor. She pulled up in her husband's truck, jumped out, and stood there staring at her destroyed Mercedes with her mouth hanging open. The car looked like it had been hit with artillery. The hood was caved in, the windshield was shattered, the roof had multiple puncture holes, and both passenger side doors were dented beyond repair. Then she looked up at me. I was standing on my front porch, watching. Our eyes met, and I saw the exact moment she realized what had happened. Her face went from shock to fury in about 2 seconds. "You did this," she screamed, storming across my lawn. "You did this on purpose." "I did not do anything," I said calmly. "The ice melted and fell, that's what ice does. You left those icicles there, I sent you multiple violation notices. And I have been consulting with my lawyer about the validity of those fines. I was within my rights to dispute them before taking action." Your icicles destroyed my car. Your car was parked on a public street. I do not control where you park." She was shaking with rage. "I will sue you for every penny you have got. This is property damage. This is vandalism." "Vandalism requires intent and deliberate action. I did not throw ice at your car. I did not sabotage anything. Nature took its course. If anything, you should have known better than to park under a roofline with visible ice formations." A crowd had gathered by this point. Doug was filming on his phone. Sarah from 2 doors down was trying not to laugh. Tom, who had gotten fined $300 last year for having garden gnomes Patricia deemed too tacky, was openly grinning. Patricia called the police. I figured she would. 2 officers from the Aurora Police Department showed up about 30 minutes later. They took statements from everyone, looked at the car, looked at my roof, and took a lot of photos. One of them, Officer Martinez, came to talk to me privately. "So, Mr. Garrison, did you know there was ice on your roof?" "Of course. It is winter in Colorado. Everyone has ice on their roof." "And you knew it could fall?" "I know that ice melts when it gets warm, yes." "Did you know Mrs. Hendricks was parked there?" "I was at work all day. I have no idea when she parked there or why she chose that spot." Officer Martinez studied me for a long moment. "Look, I am going to be straight with you. This is a civil matter, not criminal. You did not do anything illegal. Property owners are not legally required to remove ice from their roofs unless it poses an immediate threat to public infrastructure or right-of-way pedestrian areas. A car parked on a public street does not qualify. Mrs. Hendricks can file a claim with her insurance or sue you in civil court, but we cannot do anything here." "That's what I figured," I said. "That said," he continued, lowering his voice, "you might want to be prepared for her to make your life difficult. HOA boards have a lot of power." "Oh, I am aware. She has been making my life difficult for months." He nodded like he understood more than he was saying. "Good luck, man." The police left without filing any charges. Patricia stood next to her demolished car, on the phone with what I assumed was her insurance company, shooting daggers at me with her eyes. I went back inside, poured myself a drink, and allowed myself a small smile. It was not quite justice, but it was definitely satisfying. The next day, I got another orange envelope. This one was not a fine. It was a notice that the HOA board was taking legal action against me for property damage and would be placing a lien on my house if I did not pay for the repairs to Patricia's vehicle. The estimated cost was $12,000. I immediately called Marcus. "They cannot do that, can they?" "Let me look at your HOA documents," he said. I scanned and emailed everything to him. He called me back an hour later. "Okay, so here is the deal. They can place a lien on your property for unpaid fines and dues, but they cannot place a lien for alleged damages. That would have to go through a civil court. She is trying to bully you." "So what do I do?" "You need a lawyer." "Not me, I am just a paralegal, but you need someone who specializes in property law and HOA disputes." I spent the next week researching attorneys. I found a guy named Robert Chen, who had a reputation for taking on HOA boards. His initial consultation fee was $250, but after I explained the situation, he agreed to meet with me for free. Robert was in his 40s, sharp-looking, and clearly enjoyed sticking it to overreaching HOAs. He listened to my story, reviewed all my documentation, and then leaned back in his chair with a satisfied expression. "This is one of the most clear-cut cases I have seen," he said. "She has no legal standing. You did not have a duty to protect her vehicle from natural events. Colorado case law is very clear on this. If a tree branch falls on someone's car during a storm, The property owner is not liable unless they knew the tree was diseased and posed a danger. Same principle applies here. So I am in the clear, legally, yes, but HOAs fight dirty. She's going to keep fining you, keep issuing violation notices, and try to make you so miserable that you either pay her off or sell your house. I have seen it 100 times. What can I do? We fight back. I can send her a cease and desist letter explaining that any further retaliatory action will result in a harassment lawsuit. We can also countersue for abuse of process and request that the court invalidate all the fines she has issued to you. How much will that cost me? If we go to trial, probably $5,000 to $10,000. But most of these cases settle once the HOA realizes they are going to lose. I think I can get your fines refunded and get her to back off for around $3,000 in legal fees. It was a lot of money, but the principle mattered. I hired him on the spot. Robert sent the cease and desist letter the following week. It was a beautifully written piece of legal intimidation, citing multiple Colorado statutes and case precedents, and making it very clear that any further action from the HOA would result in significant legal consequences. He also filed a formal complaint with the Colorado HOA Oversight Board, claiming harassment and abuse of authority. Patricia did not take it well. At the next board meeting, which I attended for the first time in years, she stood at the podium and went on a 15-minute rant about disrespectful homeowners who endangered the community and refused to follow simple guidelines. She did not mention me by name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. When it was time for homeowner comments, I stood up. I would like to address the board regarding the pattern of excessive fines being issued for minor or non-existent violations. Over the past 4 months, I have been fined over $1,300 for icicles on my roof, a naturally occurring phenomenon that I had no reasonable ability to prevent. Furthermore, the HOA president has attempted to hold me financially responsible for damage to her personal vehicle, which was parked on a public street and damaged by falling ice. This is not responsible governance. This is personal retaliation. The room was silent. Patricia's face turned an impressive shade of red. "You are out of order, Mr. Garrison. I am a homeowner making a formal comment during the designated comment period. I am very much in order." Another board member, a quiet guy named Frank, who I had never heard say much of anything, spoke up. "Patricia, maybe we should discuss this. I have been getting complaints from other homeowners too. The fines have been pretty aggressive this year." "The fines are in accordance with our guidelines," Patricia snapped. "The guidelines give you discretion," Frank said. "Maybe we have been exercising that discretion a little too harshly." A few other people in the audience murmured agreement. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue but realized she was losing the room. She tabled the discussion and moved on to other business, but I could tell the seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next few weeks, I started connecting with other homeowners who had been fined by Patricia. There were a lot of us. Tom with his garden gnomes, Lisa who got fined for having a lawn ornament that was 6 inches too tall, Richard who got dinged for having a basketball hoop in his driveway, and at least a dozen others. We formed an informal coalition and started attending every board meeting, asking pointed questions and demanding accountability. Patricia tried to maintain control, but her support on the board was crumbling. Frank and 2 other members started openly questioning her decisions. At the April meeting, there was a motion to review all fines issued in the past year and potentially refund those deemed excessive or unjustified. It passed 4-1, with only Patricia voting against it. That is when things got really interesting. During the review process, it came out that Patricia had been pocketing some of the fine money. Not all of it, and not in an obvious way, but she had been billing the HOA for various expenses, office supplies, mileage, and community maintenance, and then using fine revenue to reimburse herself without proper documentation or approval from the board. It was not a huge amount, maybe $3,000 or $4,000 over 2 years, but it was embezzlement. Frank brought it to the attention of the rest of the board, and they voted to suspend Patricia pending an investigation. She tried to fight it, claimed it was a misunderstanding, but the numbers did not lie. The HOA hired a forensic accountant who confirmed that there were significant financial irregularities tied directly to Patricia's management. In June, the board voted unanimously to remove Patricia as president and filed a report with the Aurora Police Department. By July, she was facing criminal charges for embezzlement and misuse of community funds. The prosecutor was not messing around either. Colorado takes HOA fraud seriously because these organizations manage millions of dollars in collective homeowner assets. I attended her arraignment hearing, not because I wanted to gloat, but because I wanted to see the end of the story. She stood before the judge looking small and defeated, nothing like the aggressive tyrant who had terrorized the neighborhood for years. Her lawyer tried to argue that it was an accounting error, but the evidence was overwhelming. She had written herself checks, falsified expense reports, and diverted community funds for personal use. She ended up pleading guilty to a reduced charge of theft and misuse of fiduciary funds. The judge sentenced her to 2 years of probation, 300 hours of community service, and ordered her to pay full restitution to the HOA, which came out to just over $3,800. She was also permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in the state of Colorado. The new board, led by Frank, was a completely different animal. Their first order of business was to review and revise the community guidelines, removing vague clauses that had been used to justify excessive fines. They also implemented a new appeal process that actually gave homeowners a fair chance to contest violations. And they refunded every single fine that Patricia had issued in the past year, including all $1,300 she had taken from me. I got a check in the mail in August along with a letter of apology from the board. It felt good, but honestly, the money was not the point anymore. The point was that we had stood up to a bully and won. We had held someone accountable who thought she was above the rules. My neighbor Tom threw a block party to celebrate the new board. Pretty much the whole street showed up. We grilled burgers, drank beer, and everyone shared their horror stories about Patricia's reign of terror. It was cathartic. Doug told the story about the icicles and Patricia's car at least 5 times, embellishing it more each time until it sounded like an action movie. People laughed until they cried. I found myself talking to Sarah, the woman from 2 doors down. She was funny and smart, and we ended up sitting on my porch long after the party wound down, just talking about life and neighborhoods and how weird it was that we all lived so close together but barely knew each other. "You know, you are kind of a legend now," she said, smiling. "The guy who took down the evil HOA president with icicles. I did not really take her down. She took herself down by stealing money." "Yeah, but you started it. You stood up to her when everyone else was too scared. That mattered." Maybe it did. I had not thought of it that way, but she was right. Sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to back down, and suddenly, everyone else finds their courage too. Fall came, and with it, a new sense of normalcy in Pine Ridge Estates. Frank and the new board were competent and fair. Violation notices became rare and were only issued for actual problems, like someone leaving trash bins out for a week or a genuinely dangerous tree branch. The community started to feel like an actual community instead of a police state. I fixed my gutters properly that October, hired a professional to clean them out and install guards so they would not clog again. Not because I was worried about fines, but because I did not want to deal with icicles next winter. Well, that and because Sarah had mentioned she liked going for walks through the neighborhood, and I did not want her to have to dodge falling ice when she passed my house. We started dating in November. It was unexpected but good. She had been through her own divorce a few years back and understood the need to take things slow. We would have dinner a couple times a week, watch movies, talk about everything and nothing. It was comfortable in a way I had not experienced in a long time. Winter came again, and this time my roof stayed clear. The new gutter guards worked perfectly. There were a few small icicles here and there, nothing major, just the normal amount you would expect on any Colorado house in January. Nobody sent me violation notices. Nobody threatened to fine me. It was boring and wonderful. I ran into Patricia once at the grocery store in December. She saw me, and for a second I thought she might make a scene, but she just looked away and hurried down a different aisle. She looked older, worn down by the consequences of her actions. I did not feel triumphant seeing her like that. I just felt tired and grateful it was over. Christmas was different that year. The neighborhood actually felt festive. People put up lights without worrying if they were the approved color temperature. Kids built snowmen in their front yards without fear of violation notices. Tom put up an entire army of garden gnomes wearing Santa hats, and instead of a fine, he got compliments from the new board. Sarah and I hosted a New Year's Eve party at my place. Nothing fancy, just neighbors hanging out, playing cards and watching the ball drop on TV. At midnight, everyone cheered and hugged, and I found myself thinking about how much had changed in a single year. I had gone from being a lonely, stressed-out guy just trying to keep his head down to someone with friends, a girlfriend, and a genuine sense of belonging in this community. In February, I got an official letter from Robert Chen's office. The case was fully closed. All legal fees had been paid, all documentation had been filed with the county, and Patricia's criminal case had been completed. He included a final bill, which was actually lower than his original estimate, and a handwritten note that said, "Glad we could help. HOAs need people like you to keep them honest." I framed that note and hung it in my home office, right next to a photo Doug had taken of Patricia's demolished Mercedes surrounded by shattered ice. It was a reminder that sometimes the little guy actually wins. Sometimes standing up to petty tyrants works. Sometimes the system, slow and frustrating as it is, eventually delivers justice. Spring arrived, and with it came the annual HOA election. Frank ran for president officially and won by a landslide. The new board was full of reasonable people who actually cared about the community, rather than power. They voted to reduce annual dues slightly since Patricia's spending had been excessive, and they organized actual community events that people wanted to attend, like a spring festival and a neighborhood yard sale. Sarah and I walked through the yard sale holding hands, looking at random junk that people were selling. She found an old set of wind chimes that she loved, and I haggled the price down to $5 just to make her laugh. We hung them on my back porch that afternoon, and they made this pleasant ringing sound whenever the breeze picked up. "You know what I realized?" Sarah said as we sat on the porch listening to the chimes. "This neighborhood is actually pretty great when you do not have someone making everyone miserable." "Yeah," I agreed. "It really is." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Work was good. My relationship with Sarah was good. The neighborhood was good. I even started going to the monthly board meetings occasionally, not because I had to, but because I actually wanted to know what was going on and have a say in community decisions. In June, Frank approached me about joining the board. "We have an open seat, and honestly, you would be perfect for it. You understand the rules, you are fair-minded, and people respect you." I was hesitant at first. The last thing I wanted was to become what I had hated, but Sarah encouraged me. "You would be good at it," she said. "And you could make sure nobody else ever abuses the system the way Patricia did." So I ran. My campaign, if you could call it that, was simple. I went door to door, talked to neighbors, listened to their concerns, and promised to be fair and reasonable. I won by a comfortable margin. Being on the board was actually kind of interesting. We dealt with real issues like maintaining the community pool, arranging for snow removal, and settling disputes between neighbors. But we did it with common sense and compassion, not petty vindictiveness. If someone had a legitimate problem, we worked with them to find a solution. If someone was being unreasonable, we explained why and tried to educate rather than punish. One of my first acts as a board member was to propose a complete rewrite of the property maintenance section of the guidelines. I wanted clear, specific language that did not leave room for arbitrary interpretation. After several meetings and input from homeowners, we passed new rules that were fair and actually made sense. Yes, you had to maintain your property. No, you would not get fined for icicles or minor cosmetic issues. The transformation of Pine Ridge Estates was remarkable. Within a year of Patricia's removal, the whole atmosphere had changed. People actually talked to their neighbors now. Kids played outside without being yelled at. There was a sense of community that I am pretty sure had never existed before. I saw Patricia one more time, about a year and a half after everything went down. I was at a community service event, helping to clean up a local park as part of a board initiative, and she was there too, fulfilling her court-ordered service hours. We ended up working on opposite ends of the same area, picking up trash and pulling weeds. We did not speak at first. I was not sure what to say, and I got the sense she was not either. But eventually, curiosity got the better of me. During a break, I walked over to where she was sitting. "Patricia," she looked up, surprised. "Jacob." "How have you been?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "How do you think? I lost everything. My position, my reputation, any respect I had in this community. You stole money and abused your power. Those are consequences, not persecution. I know." She looked down, picking at the grass. "I know. I convinced myself I was doing the right thing, keeping the neighborhood perfect, maintaining standards. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about the community and started being about control, about me being in charge." It was the closest thing to an apology I was going to get, and honestly, it was more than I expected. "For what it is worth, I hope you figure things out," she nodded. "Your girlfriend seems nice. Sarah, right? I have seen you two around. She is. We are happy. Good, that's good." She stood up and grabbed her trash bag. "I really am sorry, Jacob, about the fines, about all of it. I was not a good person back then. You have a chance to be better now." She smiled sadly. "Maybe we will see." I watched her walk away, and I felt something I had not expected to feel. Pity. Not enough to regret what had happened. She had brought it on herself, but enough to hope she would eventually find some kind of peace. Sarah and I got engaged that December. I proposed on the same porch where we had hung the wind chimes, with snow falling softly and those chimes ringing in the winter breeze. She said yes, before I even finished the question. We got married the following summer in a small ceremony at the community clubhouse. It felt appropriate somehow, getting married in the same place where I had once stood up to an abusive HOA president. Frank officiated, which was a little unconventional, but he had gotten certified online just for us. Half the neighborhood showed up. Even Tom brought his garden gnomes and set them up as decorations, which was ridiculous and perfect. During the reception, Doug gave a toast and told the story of the icicles again. Everyone laughed, including Sarah, who had heard it a million times but still found it funny. "To Jacob," Doug said, raising his glass. "The man who proved that sometimes the best revenge is just letting nature take its course." Everyone cheered and drank, and I looked around at all these people who had become my friends, my family, my community. This neighborhood that I had almost left in frustration had become home in the truest sense of the word. Sarah and I bought a bigger house the next year, still in Pine Ridge Estates, because we did not want to leave. We found a place with a better roof drainage system, though, just in case. Old habits and all that. I served on the HOA board for 4 years before stepping down to focus on my family. Sarah and I had a daughter, Emily, and suddenly my priorities shifted. But I made sure to stay involved, going to meetings, voting in elections, and generally keeping an eye on things. The board remained solid, full of good people who cared about the community for the right reasons. Pine Ridge Estates never made the news or became famous for anything. We were just a normal suburban neighborhood in Aurora, Colorado, with normal people living normal lives. But to me, it represented something important. It was proof that communities could change, that standing up to abuse mattered, and that sometimes winning meant nothing more complicated than refusing to back down when you were right. The icicles never became a problem again. I kept my gutters clean, maintained my roof properly, and generally stayed on top of things. But every winter when I saw ice forming on houses around the neighborhood, I would smile and remember that crazy week when nature had been my accomplice in the most satisfying act of petty revenge I would ever experience. People still talk about it sometimes. The legend of Patricia and the icicles. New neighbors hear the story and laugh, thinking it is probably exaggerated. But those of us who were there, who lived through the tyranny and celebrated the liberation, we know the truth. We know that sometimes the universe has a sense of humor. Sometimes karma is real. And sometimes, if you are patient and a little bit lucky, justice comes in the form of 40 pounds of falling ice crashing down on exactly the right car at exactly the right moment. I never regretted it. Not the fight, not the legal fees, not any of it. Because it led to real change. It led to a better community, better relationships, and ultimately, a better life. And if I had to do it all over again, I would not change a thing, except maybe I would have taken video of the icicles falling. That would have been worth a fortune on the internet. But you can't win them all, and honestly, the memory is enough. The memory of standing on my porch, watching nature deliver perfect justice, and knowing that sometimes, just sometimes, the little guy actually wins.